Hello, everyone, and welcome to Think Like a Dog podcast, hosted by Andreia and Millie Travis. In this podcast, we discuss how to build the best relationship with your dog. From rescues to reactivity, we'll cover it all. And today we are going to discuss what to look for in a trainer. And we have with us today Easton, who started as Millie's client and is now one of her trainers. So we are going to start off talking about, different things to look for. How do you start looking for a trainer? For myself, I started a lot of people just go online and they type in best trainer around me, and that's it. You think there's only one kind of training and nothing else, but there is so much more behind that.
Yeah, there's a lot. Almost probably too much information that you can find on the internet and then get yourself confused and overwhelmed. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of different types of trainers, and we want to get into today what it means when somebody identifies themselves as purely positive training or a balance trainer or obedience trainer, and what all of those methods are. But when you're looking for a trainer and you just go on Google, depending on the issues that you're having, you might need to be looking for a very specific type of trainer. I know when Easton, I think her dog is leash reactivity. Do you want to talk about Obi? Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm going to have you talk about him.
Yeah. I adopted Obi in 2015 from Fulton County, Lifeline Animal Services. And he just right away had a lot of behavioral issues. We just kind of let it simmer and let him do his thing. And then eventually we're done kind of dealing with those problems. So we called, I think the first trainer we had out, we were just kind of at the end of our leash, pun. We just were desperate. So we looked up reputable dog trainers. I think I probably Googled the same thing, best dog trainer. And every person says they're the best. And you believe it. So it was one of those package type deals where it's you pay for a set amount of training sessions, and it's all kind of structured, this one we're going to do this session, we're going to work on this session we're going to work on this, and you just progress, and you pay for a whole package basically. So you sign on for, I think it was 6 sessions, and so we thought after these 6 sessions our dog is trained and we're done, because that's kind of what they sell you on, is that it's once you're done, your dog is trained, it's all good. Didn't work for us. He still was having a bunch of issues. I remember it was the day after he finished training. We took him out on a walk. This was all e-collar training too. It was all we learned. We didn't really go over any really anything else aside from just the e-collar. So we took Obi out on a walk. He was in a perfect heel until we passed another dog head on, and he went for the other dog and got in a fight. I called the trainer crying. I was like, I thought he was trained. What do we do? Yeah, so that was our first experience with training. And then just for a few years, we went back to doing nothing because we were he can't be trained.
Yeah, we did it.
Yeah.
So, and it didn't work. Yeah. So it's the dog's broken. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what a lot of people go through, is thinking that my dog is not trainable.
Exactly.
And when I went through that with Bubbles, I didn't know. I'm thinking, okay, he just needs to be trained and learn how to behave and obey me, and that's it.
Yeah.
He's going to be fine. And I started looking into board and train. That was my first option, because I think
enticing.
I just want to send him to this wonderful place that's going to teach him how to think and how to behave, and all is going to be great. And then, I even talked to a facility that does board and train, and we were going to go check it out. But I knew deep inside, I'm that's not right, because I don't want to send him off. I know that I knew in some form what happened the first time, why he got into that fight. So I felt bad to just send him away, but it just sounds so nice. Board and train, 2 weeks, your dog's going to be amazing when they're back.
Yep.
And I wanted to even ask you guys, like, what are your thoughts in board and train? A lot of people want to do that or have done that and may not have found the solution.
So I think the similarities between board and trains and sort of like people's idea of when they type in best dog trainer, what that means is we take the human out of the equation, right? And people forget that they also might have to play some sort of part. It's not that the dog is trained, it's that the dog has learned to respond to a situation differently because the dog is being given different information, right? So I think it is very, it sounds great to be like, okay, I'm going to send my dog off and they're going to learn and they're going to come back this perfect dog. And I'm willing to pay somebody probably more money than I would just doing one-on-one sessions because I don't have the time or I have kids or whatever it is. But then the problem is that the dog comes back and because it's given the same information it was given, before the board and train, it's going to respond the same. The dog will probably be great ideally for the trainer that you send them off with, but when it comes back, if nothing changes at home, then the dog doesn't change. So it's not dog training. It's solving. I mean, what we do, and the biggest difference is we sort of fix a miscommunication in the relationship, and then teach a dog healthier coping mechanisms to respond to things or to respond to stressors. But I'm not saying that there's never a time where board and trains might work. I do think for very, very, very severe cases, the dog maybe needs to come out of that environment and then have a trainer almost like rewire that brain, right? And then I do think that there are plenty of trainers too that do board and trains in a very in a way where it involves the human a lot. I know some dog trainers will do board and trains like Monday through Friday and the dog goes home on the weekends for the human to practice. But a lot of the time that I get asked about board and trains, it's I want to go on vacation and I figured kill two birds with one stone. Let's get the dog trained while I'm on vacation.
Yeah.
Right? And it just doesn't work like that.
No.
It has nothing. It's how you live with your dog in every day. So yes and no for board and trains. It just depends on who's doing it and the type of issue that you're having.
Yeah. I never once thought I was the issue.
Right.
When I was looking for a trainer for my dog, it never crossed my mind that it had anything to do with me. I was like, he's a shelter dog. He's got baggage. He's messed up. I need help. But I didn't know until that's, I think, what changed things for me when I met you, and realized that I needed to change if I was going to expect him to change. And that's, I think, the biggest thing with board and trains too. If the trainer is kind of teaching you like things that you need to change so your dog can change, I think that it can be effective, but most of the time it is.
Yeah. And with your session, and we joke about it all the time, but I came away from that session thinking I bombed it. I'm like, oh my God, this dog already walks because we didn't pass any dogs, right? So when we went our walk, I was like, this dog is walking perfectly. I can't, he seems really chill. I mean, yeah, they don't really have a lot of boundaries in the home. There's how they live with them in a day-to-day is could be potentially a little confusing for him. But other than that, he's a pretty solid dog. I don't really understand. It was that session that I think solidified for me that the type of training we do is it matters, right? Looking at the big picture and not just the actual behavior. And I think that that's the biggest difference between relationship and psychology based training and dog trainers is I'm not going to, for a first session, I'm not going to just put your dog in, okay, let's say it's a dog who bites men, right? I'm not going to just bring all the men I know over, right? That first session, I'm going to sit there and feel like, okay, well, why is this happening, right? Is this happening because the dog is assuming that that you belong to him and that he's claiming something? Is this happening because he's under socialized? Is this happening because you're accidentally reinforcing this behavior? And then we're going to go through all of that and then teach the dog another way of dealing with that on top of teaching you how to provide information that's different to your dog before we ever test it.
Yeah.
And I think that that's the biggest difference between what we do and what a lot of people think dog training is.
Right.
Yeah. And it's so big that what you've taught us is how energy plays such a big part in connecting with your dog. And that's, you can't just train a dog to sit, stay, heel, whichever command is about the energy that you and your dog share together.
Yeah.
And that you can get in a board and train a lot of times if the energy is the problem.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Energy is a big factor in the relationship. When I change the energy around my dog, they all change.
Yeah.
It's so different when I walk in the room and when someone that's not typically used to being with them walks in the room, they act completely different. So if I didn't understand that energy plays such a big part, nothing would change in our relationship, and I would feel like any money that I'm putting into their trainings is not really, reflecting a solution.
Or my dog's broken.
Or a lot of times people think that that's why they end up in shelters and
we get all the time of like, my dog is still having this issue, but we've been through trainers, and now my husband's like, we're not doing another trainer because they assume that all trainers are the same.
Yeah.
If it didn't work the first time, it's not going to work this time. I get that a lot.
Yeah, that's kind of where we were. That's when I found your company and like read the website and kind of the difference in the way that you look at dogs versus the way that a lot of other trainers look at dogs. It changed. Like we both were like, this dog cannot be trained.
Right. I mean, that dog, it blows my mind still when you tell me some of the things that he used to do.
Oh, yeah.
Like it blows my mind. But he, I think if we're going to categorize like different types of trainers, there's probably balance training, which that's going to be people who will use, positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement, positive punishment, all of that, right? So they're going to use all four quadrants of learning, right? Then there's going to be purely positive trainers who only will use positive reinforcement to teach. And then a lot of times there are just strictly obedience trainers. And to me, I think that's so different from what we do, just as different as like service dog training is, right? Because I think like I know competition obedience trainers that regardless of the situation that dog is in, even if it's like the world is ending, that dog will listen. Like I know that dog is going to sit when it is told sit. But that person's been working with that dog for 8 hours a day, every single day since it was 8 weeks old. It's not something that your average, mother of two can do with her dog. But today we'll talk about purely positive balance training. And then what we do, which is more psychology and relationship based training, which takes kind of both of those and puts them all together and adds your relationship into it as well.
Yeah.
Now, I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between dog training and then if you're looking to dog psychology. What is the difference between dog psychology and dog training?
You want to take it or you want me to?
I want you to take it.
Okay. All right. I mean, it's we kind of already hit on it, which is, dog training assumes that the dog is the one that needs to change and that the dog, given the same information, same environment, same patterns, same everything, that we can teach the dog to do something different with everything else staying the same. What we do is we look at, well, why is a behavior happening, which is dog psychology, right? Of, okay, well, there's a miscommunication here between human and dog. Something's getting lost in translation, right? And we try to figure out the why based on the dog's perspective of the situation, basically, right? And then we teach the human and the dog how to get a different behavior from the dog, but not without getting a different one from the human too. Ours is definitely something that requires the human to work a little bit harder.
Oh yeah, we've kind of become translators.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, because when I heard that first term of like dog psychology, I never knew that was a thing or that existed.
Yeah.
And that's even why we named this Think Like a Dog, because the first thing that you told me was you have to start thinking like your dog. You have to understand your dog and understand how your dog takes in information, because a lot of times with just dog training, people want to, teach them how to sit and all these commands. And that's more for us than the dog.
Yeah. And it's valuable and it's fun to do. Like I do obedience with Kemper and it is so fun. But that's not the reason that he looks to me for information when we're in a, a tight spot or whatever it is. It's just something fun to do with your dog. It's great for kids and puppies, but unless you're doing it all day, every day, it's not going to, like, your dog's not going to sit when, let's say the door opens and you've got, a bunch of your family over for Thanksgiving. Your dog's not going to care about the sit more than the thing that, you're calling the dog trainer out to fix. Right. But yeah, I mean, with dog psychology, it really is one of those things where we want so badly. Nobody ever calls us out with bad intentions. It's nobody ever calls any trainer with bad intentions ever. They're trying to help their dog, but purely positive training and balanced training and somebody offering you a chance to change your dog without you necessarily having to change. To most people, that's like, well, why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I do that? Because we don't think about the fact that they are a different species and they are learning from us in every single moment. I mean, you've heard me say that how many times regardless of if you're intending to teach your dog something, they're learning. Yeah. So it's how we live with them in every single moment. And some people just, it's overwhelming to think about that. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when people look for dog training, dog psychology is not something that is talked about often. People don't think it even exists. Like, what is dog psychology? The first time I ever heard about it was when I met you. And then I came to learn, oh, there is such a thing of dog psychology. There is a difference. And thankfully, we got pretty lucky because Bubbles, that was the first interaction he had with training was with you. Yeah. And it didn't really confuse him, with other trainings. And then we came to you with that history of past trainings. He came just ready, first time being
fresh
trained.
From the shelter. Yep. Ready to learn.
Ready to learn. And so that was lucky of us. But what would you say for people that have been through training and it didn't work out and now they're going to look for, a psychology-based trainer? Is that something that they should, is it like a different step to start with that dog because they have been through that previous training? Do you feel like they have, because a lot of people might think, but my dog has been confused.
Yeah.
I mean, can a dog really be confused?
I feel like personally, it was confusing for me because I had to relearn how to communicate with my dog. Like, for instance, the initial way that we used the e-collar for my dog with the previous trainer was a really, really high level. It was always looking for a big reaction when we would stim him. It wasn't the way we teach it now, which is the lowest level possible where we see a response from them, but not a reaction. So for my dog, he had been used to just being blasted with the e-collar all the time. When I switched over to the way that Millie teaches it, he clicked right away. He instantly understood what I was.
Didn't you say that there was one time he was so packed up with you that you went?
I went outside and he came outside with me. I didn't know.
Just like right on her head.
Yeah. He was just waiting.
Yeah. That's amazing.
But that Obi wasn't confused by I provided him clear information and he understood it immediately. Yeah. For me, it was hard to kind of change the way that my brain thought about it.
Yeah. I think as a trainer too, because there's Zoe, Jess's dog. I do get a lot of dogs who are very well trained. They are just they're still struggling with their behavior, right? So there's a difference between, I posted a long time ago on our Instagram, but there's a huge difference between well-trained and well-behaved, a huge difference, right? So I think as a trainer, when I have a dog who's gone through a lot of obedience focused and a lot of heavy corrections, or even just purely positive, right? The struggle I have is I have to now reattach that dog's body and their mind, right? Because now those two things are not in sync. Because now we've told the dog to sit, but we've never really done anything different with the way that it's feeling, right? So I struggle a lot with that. I struggle a lot with that because it's one of those things where I have trouble telling how the dog is actually feeling. And then it's going to seem like these like random blow-ups, and they're not random. It's just the dog has been conditioned to not show how they're feeling through their body language. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's a struggle, I guess, for me.
It's almost like suppression a little bit.
Yeah. It's suppression-based training.
Yeah.
But it gives you what you want right up until you pass that dog's threshold, and then the dog is blowing up again. But yeah, I mean, it's probably more so confusing for the humans because they're used to doing a lot of talking to the dogs. They're used to needing to bring a ton of treats on the walks, or used to using the correction or the e-collar as correction based. So it's rewiring more the human's brain, but the dog catches. I mean, the dog's going to move forward as quickly as you let them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all about, like Easton said, it's more confusing for the human than the dog to, go through a new training and a new way to be. Clear communication is the best thing. And I feel like when they feel that clear communication, they're just going to, go on and start following the lead of their pack leader, of their human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask too, like, what is the difference between balanced training and purely positive training?
Yeah. So purely positive is going to be strictly telling the dog when they are doing something right. Okay. And they're going to be rewarding all of that. Balanced training is going to be telling the dog when they are doing something wrong and when they are doing something right. So correcting negative behaviors, rewarding positive behaviors. At their core, neither one of them are bad ways of training. It's just you can't apply the same thing, the same learning style to every single dog. Just like every kid, every person doesn't learn the same. Every dog doesn't learn the same. And the bigger problem that I have is neither one of them ever ask why the dog is acting like that. What created that? Because chances are what created it will be the thing that fixes it.
Yeah.
But yeah, purely positives, that's what people are looking for now when they're Googling. They want somebody who's never going to tell the dog no or never going to correct a negative behavior, because we see corrections as, I don't know, as punishment or sometimes even abuse, right? But we kind of feel the same way about corrections, where we are not going to just go and tell the dog that they're doing something wrong. We do direction first. Yeah. We show the dog what we want them to do. And then after a while of giving them the expectations of, this is what you need to be doing in this moment, and I'm going to be providing you that information and really supporting you through it, then maybe we'll give a correction. But our corrections are very light. I mean, we never use the e-collar for correction, but it's still a human way of looking at dog training.
Yeah, exactly.
Dogs, when they correct each other, they use their teeth.
Well, and I feel like it's more like now that I know what I know, before I probably would have looked for a purely positive trainer just because I'm like,
it sounds nice.
Yeah, and it looks better to see my dog like get treats and
happy. Yeah, of course.
But for a dog, it's arguably more fair to when it's needed to give a correction, and then there's clarity, and then they know what's expected of them. There's no confusion.
Yeah. I mean, when we were in California, I couldn't find the car, and I never could. I never can. I can't ever remember where I parked my car. But Easton and I were walking down the street, and she was trying to train me, I guess. But
we're doing like a hot and cold game, but
but you weren't telling me anything.
Yeah, exactly.
So to me, that feeling of, okay, well, you're not going to tell me when I'm making the wrong turn, and you're also not going to tell me when I'm making the right turn. You're just going to sit here and watch me try to figure it out, right? It's, if you only tell me when I'm doing something right, then I'm probably going to go two streets down the wrong way and have to figure my way back. And then if you only tell me when I'm doing something wrong, that's the same amount of information as only telling me that when I'm doing something right.
Yeah.
But it's also not fair to just leave it up to the dog to just guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. But are there issues that can be solved with purely positive training, would you say?
Maybe not. Maybe not issues. It's not a bad way to get kids and dogs started, or kids and puppies, right? So it's not a bad way to get the dog motivated around following a 5-year-old's lead, right? Because it's just not natural for a dog to do that. But there's not a time, or there's not an issue that can be completely solved by purely positive training. But they're absolutely, I mean, we use it all the time. It's just, we use positive reinforcement on top of other ways of communicating with the dog, not just
Providing the most information possible by a balance of both.
Yeah. And with me, I knew with positive reinforcement training, which was the opposite, like for me, what I really wanted to do was to fix the problem of, it started with Bubbles, and I wanted to just send him to a really good, strict training camp and he'll be fixed, because his problem was in the beginning was like food reactivity when there's other dogs around. So I wanted someone that was more strict than purely positive, because I knew that wasn't going to work for me. But
You're a smart dog owner.
well,
she had powerful breeds. Yeah.
Bubbles is a very strong dog. And I knew that, in order for me to be able to handle him, he had to obey me. But I didn't understand what balanced and positive and strict training and like, there's the training camps that says like military canine training, and there's so many different things behind it. But when I learned how to better communicate with him and to use that correction of telling him when he's doing something right and when he's doing something wrong, it resulted in him better understanding what I wanted from him. And that really helped build our relationship.
The problem is that most balanced trainers, or people who call themselves balanced training, are really recipe-based trainers, right? So regardless of the issue that is being brought to them, they have a system and they know what they're going to do with your dog before they ever even meet your dog. They have, every dog, I use a prong on every dog, I use an e-collar on every dog, or I never do these things. So that is, one of the things that I tell people who maybe aren't local to us or whatever is I say, watch out for trainers who know what they have a plan for your dog before they meet your dog, before they ask why your dog is acting like this, before they ask if there's rules and boundaries in the house, if there's a reason your dog might be displaying this behavior. But yeah, I mean, I think for your typical happy-go-lucky, just dog with no manners, purely positive can do it. Balanced training absolutely can do it. It's just we tend to get people who have their dogs have severe behavioral issues, and they either know that those things won't work, or they've tried them and they are looking for just a different word behind dog trainer.
Yeah.
Just something different.
But it's just so, dogs are they're so different in so many ways. Like, for example, Max, our doodle, I initially thought, like, when we sent Max to evaluation, I had an expectation behind every dog when they went to day camp for evaluation, because I knew I had them figure it out. I'm like, but I knew how Max was going to act, Bubbles, Kane. But when we sent Max for evaluation, I thought, okay, Max is going to be like a tornado in that day camp. He's going to go in there.
Yeah, he's very good.
And he's going to go bananas, because here I didn't know how to correct him in different ways. So, for me, it was just like when we play fetch, he was constantly barking at me, constantly trying to bite my hand and get the ball out of my hand. Every time I walk in the room, he wanted the attention on him. So I thought, okay, I know what Millie's going to say. When I went to pick him up, Millie was like, he was the easiest evaluation I've ever had, and he's the best dog ever. I'm like, what?
He was like drop lead in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I feel like I sent a video to you or posted one that day.
Yeah.
You that day decided you were going to rearrange the whole campground.
Yeah.
She does that about
once a month.
Just all of a sudden nothing's working. We have to redo it all. So that day she was moving like 4 treadmills from one side of the room to the other, and that was their first day. And I just put all 3 of the boys on place, and all of them just stayed on place while we were like vacuuming. There was so much going on, and they just like chilled out.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And for Max, that like our super high energy, intense, like when he's here, he wants attention on him all the time. To be told that was the best evaluation and the easiest.
Oh,
I'm
he
like,
was so easy. Yeah.
what?
But it's because the expectation here is that if I bark at you, you play with me.
Yeah.
And that you represent play to me. There is no structure. And then for him, I remember our first session when I said, let's bring Max out. And you guys look at each other and you're like, I don't know if we can bring Max out because Bubbles is out here. And then Ozzy kept telling me that Max was going to be the toughest one. And he was tough to get the loop on him for sure. He had an opinion about that. But after 10 minutes of him just being like, I don't want to, he was the most synced up with us than that any of them were. Kane was still trying to lay down. Bubbles needed 7 naps in a row before he could move on. But Max is a great example of if you give a dog different information, they respond differently. You just have to give them a reason to respond differently.
Right. And Max is, he is a dog that if somebody looks at him, he's going to do great with purely positive because he is a happy-go-lucky dog.
That would be the last dog I would
But, but if you meet him initially, if I take him to anywhere else, you're going to look at this big fluffy doodle that just loves to stay next to you and play with you. He doesn't have reactivity issues. He doesn't care about food. He doesn't care about other dogs. The only issue that we had is that he wanted to demand on us, but that was us giving him the wrong information. You would think if you hold a treat up and you tell him to sit, good boy, here you go. Then he stays quiet for that period of time until he does it again. And I show him the treat, and it's for him, you would think positive reinforcement training would work, but it wouldn't be the right way for us to go. Balance training for a dog like Max that we would look at and think positive would be the way to go. Balance was the way to go for him. And balance meaning telling him what he's doing wrong, giving him praise when he's doing something right at the right time, and showing him our expectations. And that's what really changed Max. Max is now when we play fetch, he understands. He gives me eye contact. He waits for me to throw the ball. There is no, there is no demand barking, and he does wonderful in the crate. He goes in there. He knows his, when's crate time. He lays down. He relaxes. And it was all about first changing me. What the information I was giving to him, and being able to step back and give him 2 different forms of information: the positive and the correction.
3, because you also. That first day that we worked on that, where we did structured play with him, we never corrected him. We never rewarded him. We just really, truly guided him through what we want this process to look like. And a lot of times we'll use a leash to enforce things, but that's not a correction. It's just kind of letting him know, okay, this is the expectation of you before I throw this ball, or this is what I want you to do while I'm pouring your food, whatever it is. I think the big part of balance training that people miss, if you're truly a balance trainer, most of the time you forget about the direction part, right? So it's still the dog is just offering up behaviors and you're like, yep or nope. And then the dog still has to come up with it on their own. What I think the third big way, and I think the most important thing that we do, is not asking the dog to come up with it on their own. We're showing them and we're working them through, okay, when you are in this situation, this is how I expect you to behave, and you're not in trouble for not doing it. You're not in trouble or you're not rewarded for doing it this early or whatever. We're working you through this, and I'm going to guide you step by step so that you truly have all the information that you need to succeed.
Right. But when people are interviewing trainers and going into, what trainer does my dog need, what would you say would be some red flags that people can really, look for when they're interviewing?
Definitely the recipe-based trainers. If they already, if there's a tool that they use for every single dog, right? Whether that's a prong collar, an e-collar, or something that they never use, right? I don't know that there's any tool besides a harness, but I've still used harnesses for dogs that have
certain
medical issues.
Yeah.
There's not a tool a dog training tool that I wouldn't use as long as I'm taught how to use it correctly, and that I felt like was fair to the dog.
Yeah.
But if you have a person that's just going to pigeonhole themselves into, because I don't have the information I need to use this tool correctly, therefore I'm not going to use it at all, which is fine. But then you're not offering that dog a chance who might learn best from this tool to solve that behavior. So yeah, recipe-based trainers would be a big one.
Yeah. I also think another red flag when you're interviewing is just transparency. Sometimes you can get a feel for if they're trying to if they're very open about what they do and how they do it, I think that's a big green flag. But if they're trying to, I don't know, sometimes they'll like beat around the bush or try to like not give you the whole information that you would need to make your decision. So I think transparency is a big thing for dog trainers.
And you reminded me of this earlier, but I forgot packages. I hate packages, right? We do a puppy package, which is fine, but I'm not going to make you sign up for 6 sessions if I feel like maybe you can get away with 3.
Right. Yeah.
I'm also not going to make you do that before I ever even meet your dog.
Yeah.
Right. People think that that's their dog trainer's way of saving you money. It is not. It is not. It's your dog trainer's way of trying to make sure that you stick with them.
Locking you in.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's like a marketing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have people come out to me one time and I don't see them again for a year, which is fine.
That was how, when I reached out to you, you said, we set up, I think 1 session, and I was like, let's just go ahead and set up a second one.
Yeah.
But that wasn't you telling me to do that.
Yeah.
That was because I think I need the help.
Yeah.
But after 1, I feel like the next session was a walk.
We didn't do anything. We just kind of hung out. Yeah. It was kind of weird that you paid me for it. But yeah.
Now, with dogs that have lots of reactivity issues, maybe they are on medications, or, the dog owner at this point thinks, what can I do with dogs that are extremely reactive, and they are, they've been told not to use an e-collar, not to use a prong collar. How do they, when they're interviewing and they've tried positive reinforcement, they're on these anti-anxiety medications, how do you explain to dog owners that have been told, prong collars are not good, e-collars are not good? How do you explain the use of them to these dog owners?
We actually don't use them for reactivity. We don't. I won't put an e-collar on a dog unless I feel like the dog has a foundation, right? So going back to that whole idea of it's not just right or wrong. It's not like we're sitting there like, yep, good job, or not playing hot and cold with the dog. We're giving direction. That's what we use those tools for, right? So we don't use the e-collar as a correction by any means. We use the e-collar as added information, and most of the time we won't introduce that unless the dog already understands pressure and release on the leash and place work and things like that. And prong collars we use few and far between, but when we use them, the times where I have used a prong collar has been on a large breed dog, a very happy-go-lucky large breed dog who thinks everything is a party, and most of the time their owners are older and cannot physically handle them, right? Yeah. But other than that, I don't use those tools for correction. So if they called me, I would say that's fine. I'm not handing you those tools anyway.
Yeah, I kind of think of it as almost like a privilege you earn once your relationship is there with your dog. And that's like my favorite thing to explain to people, the e-collar, especially coming from how I learned it before and how we use it now. I always get excited to be like, my dog used to have to be on a 40 and now he responds to a 3.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And Bubbles is on a 1 most of the time. Yeah.
Exactly. And I've always, and I talked about this on the last episode, I was never against tools that help me communicate with my dogs. And ever since I started to interact with larger breeds, I knew I needed something to help me walk them or, handle them when we're out in public, because obviously I'm not a big person. I don't have much strength. So they can easily just pull a little bit and, they're just leading the way. So when I first got an e-collar, I YouTubed how to put it on and I try to place it right. But in my head, I'm like, I know that the vibration part is less than the shock part. So I only use the vibration the whole time. Yeah. Anytime Bubbles would go up to the gate or he would not listen to me, I would use the vibration. And then Millie said, no, that's worse. No. That's actually worse than using the stem, because in their heads, that's really strong. The vibration, we think like, oh, our phones vibrate all the time. It's not that bad.
It's familiar to us.
It's familiar to us, not to them. So I think there's such a misconception when people think about e-collars, muzzles, leads. They don't understand that if you put it on the right way, if you know how to understand your dog, because every dog has a different level, That was big for me too. When when we reintroduced the e-collar and we worked on levels, and Bubbles was on a 2 out of, is it 100?
100, yeah.
And he understands the e-collar perfectly.
He's
But if I
so
put
good
the
on that
e-collar
collar.
to my hand and I use
can't
it,
feel
you
it.
can't feel it.
No,
So
mine's like a 14, I think, when I start to feel it.
And you even put it on your neck like a crazy person. She sent me a video.
I didn't know there was an option to not do that.
But yeah, I mean, in the dog's limbic brain, vibration represents rattlesnake. So that's why they get such a big reaction out of that. But in our heads, we think, like you said, your phone vibrates. But then we think, oh my God, shock, electrocution, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to electrocute my dog. That's not what you're doing. We need to have a whole like episode on tools just in general.
yeah, I think that's really important. A lot of people don't like them. Some people use them incorrectly. And like we were talking about people that have used it incorrectly and they use it at this crazy intense high level. And then how do you draw back from that? You know, it's just
easy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's easy.
Yeah.
That's what with Obi, it was because it's one of those things where the dog is like, thank you. Okay, you didn't have to punch me in the face. You just tap me on the shoulder and ask me what you need, you know? And that's really what we use the e-collar for is, first of all, it's not a shock. It's a stim, right? It's like a TENS unit. It's not actually, there's no electricity behind it, right? It's an electronic collar, not an electric collar, okay? I think everyone thinks of e-collar as electric collar. It's electronic collar. But I mean, we use the e-collar as pressure and release. So let's say like as a 1 would be like somebody going, excuse me. And then like a 20 would be somebody like pulling me across the store. 100's like being punched in the face, you know?
Well, and I'm sure you can imagine too with a reactive dog using high levels of correction, using that pressure during a behavior. So when Obi's already reacting and then I stim him on a really high level, that actually triggers a worse reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah, with Bubbles, he understood the vibration, but I knew that for him, every time he felt that, he would like kind of jump and figure out like, what do I need?
Yeah.
You know, so I use the e-collar on Max also because with the intense barking and like always barking. So I vibrate and he would stop and I would tell him to stop. And that was such a mistake on my part. Like I mean,
to me, it's not even right or wrong. It's what makes sense to the dog and what can we. I don't think people use the collar. I hate to say right and wrong, and that's another probably red flag for trainers is that if a trainer just flat out was like, "You're wrong" when you bring them your dog, that's a problem. But I hate to say that it's not even right or wrong. It's either we've overused it to a point where the dog didn't need it that intensity, right? Or we've miscommunicated with it. But there's no right or wrong. It's just, did it work or did it not work? And could you have done less? You know?
Yeah. And now also with the muzzle, like I wanted to just slightly touch on this too. A lot of people don't understand the concept of a muzzle. And we were talking about this before we started the podcast, how muzzle for me helped Bubbles tremendously. Like it just helps me feel more comfortable with him. It helps me give him more freedom. He doesn't really care about it because it was introduced to him the right way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, you know, when you're screening for trainers, for me, that helped me understand when I always was open to using tools.
Yeah.
So that was something that I was, okay with. But when I was interviewing a trainer and I asked them about it and they said, no, we don't use that. For me, that was, I turned away. A lot of people don't, and they continue to work with that. But for a dog like Bubbles that needed those tools for me to communicate with him, it would have been a disaster if we never used it. And learned how to use it. He would not have the freedom he has now.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. That he would not have the experiences that he has, and he would not have been able to learn in a situation that was so stress-free because of the fact that if he made a mistake, it wasn't going to harm any other dogs. And then it wasn't like humans were standing around him like on the edge of their seat, anxious, waiting for him to mess up, because he's picking up on all of that. Yeah. He knows if I'm just staring at him like, okay, please don't bite him, rather than like, you're good, I can turn my back for a second because you're not gonna be able to do any damage, you know? And that's probably the best benefit of the muzzle is not that they can't do the damage, is that the dog gets to have a human that leads them with confidence again. That's the best part about the muzzle.
Yeah. And with the muzzle, I mean, he can drink water. He can take treats. You know, he can be a dog. It's just that it helps me feel more comfortable.
Exactly.
That I can give him that freedom. So definitely I would say to a red flag is if a trainer just kind of says, no, we don't do this type of training, because then it's not going to benefit you. Every dog is different.
Yep.
So you really need someone that's open to all kinds of training so you can allow your dog to have that experience.
Yeah. And someone willing to learn too, like open to, if they haven't used that tool or that's not something they regularly use, to be willing to be like, let's try it. Let's see if
Yeah. Or just like a different way of going about it. Like flexibility is a green flag for trainers for sure, is, people who have walked into the center and said, okay, well, we're doing whatever, this process this way. It might not be the way that I said it. And I'll ask them, well, does it work? And if they say, yeah, fine.
Yeah.
Fine. It doesn't bother me.
You live with your dog.
Exactly. It's not me. You don't have to do it my way.
Yeah.
I think, obviously one of the bigger red flags is, and it happens probably more, I guess it's in every industry, but it's a lot in dog training. Make sure your dog trainer doesn't bring their ego into your session. That's very important. It doesn't have to be their way or the highway. And like Easton said, I don't live with your dog. If you have a pattern that you like and you like the behavior that it's creating, fine. But there's a lot of people that are, that really feel like you need to do it their way, or you're messing everything up, or you're a bad owner or whatever. I literally just called Easton. I left a session and the owners told me at the end, we love the way that you explain things, and you also do such a good job of not making us feel bad about things that we need to do differently. And I hate that other trainers have made this, poor little senior couple feel bad about the way that they're raising their little dog, because they just don't know any better. I couldn't you guys set up all these microphones. There are things that I couldn't do well, but that's because I haven't spent my entire life learning them. And I think dog trainers forget that when they walk into a home, is that not everybody's a dog trainer. Yeah. So let's not make people feel bad about not knowing.
I think that kind of goes back to the relationship-based training too, is that it is, they have to live with their dog, and if they're happy with their relationship, then usually they're coming to us because they're not.
Exactly.
But when you are happy with those parts of your relationship, then you don't have to do what I say. You don't have to change anything. It's where you want your relationship with your dog to be.
Yeah. And that's how everything with us is so, flexible and customizable to your relationship. Like, we will sit there with an owner and come up with I weirdly know a lot of my clients' work schedules and what times their dogs eat, because I want to find a plan that works for you. But yeah, I think with us, it's very much what works for you in your house. And if you're happy about some part of your relationship, great. But if you're not, that's why you're here, and let us help you. And if you don't want our advice, that's fine. That's another green flag, is people who, you kind of said it earlier, of people who are willing to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I love a trainer. There's a couple trainers that refer to us because they either don't normally work with the type of issue that the dog is having, or they, I don't know, whatever it is, they don't know this tool or whatever. Finding a trainer that is willing to be like, I'm actually not sure about that. Let me refer you to someone who I know works on this issue. It's rare to find, but it's a good thing to do.
Yeah. It's taking the ego out of it again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Taking the ego out of it is so important, because I know I've heard from a lot of people that they've been told, you can't do anything about this dog. But that's just because that trainer doesn't know what to do. Yeah. Instead of saying, I'm sorry, I don't know the technique, the proper technique to communicate with this dog. Maybe you should find a different trainer or a different method of training, because the one I know doesn't work.
Yeah.
Instead of telling that dog owner that's desperately trying to fix a problem, yeah, I think this dog is not trainable, and it's you should go see a vet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there's trainers. I mean, you'll see them all over Instagram of, I guess we sort of kind of did it here, but they'll brag about, okay, well, I have this dog and this dog has been through 6 other trainers or whatever. And finally it found me. I hate that because to me, I don't know how many of my clients have had to find another trainer after they worked with me. I don't know.
Yeah.
And finding the right trainer is finding the right therapist. It could be that it doesn't mean that I don't know what I'm doing. It just means that my style and maybe the human style or even the dog style didn't match up, and that's okay. But it's about finding the right trainer for you and your goals and your lifestyle and what you feel comfortable with. That's the most important part, is that you feel comfortable with what you're being asked to do. And I guess the second most important thing is that it's effective.
Yeah. And you have to be open to different methods because you never know which one will work for your dog.
Yeah.
We have to take our ego out of it too.
Yeah. Well, and you don't have to feel comfortable about everything that your dog trainer asks you to do. You have to feel comfortable enough to ask them why they're asking you to do that.
Yeah.
And if your dog trainer can't tell you anything other than, well, I just do this with every dog, then that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
You're allowed to, you feel comfortable enough to ask questions and to get comfortable. But yeah, I mean, it's not about us. It's about what's best for the dog.
Exactly. And when would you guys say group classes are appropriate versus private 101?
We use group classes as a way to practice. We don't allow people to come to our group classes that have not already done a session with us, because then that would just be like bonkers. I mean, we would be forced to put our dogs in a position where we'd have to correct them because we didn't do the initial work of teaching and directing. But we do puppy classes, group puppy classes. And I think that's a great idea, because as long as they're small, because it gets the puppy focused on, I can be around other dogs, but still paying attention to my human. But most of the time I don't do group classes for dogs that don't already have the basics.
Right. Yeah. I know that many people will look at when they're looking for trainers and they're marketing price packages, they might look at the group class and say, this sounds better because...
Or my dog is dog reactive, so I need to go to the group class and be around other dogs or it won't solve my problem.
Yeah.
We get that all the time.
Wow. Yeah.
But it's not... obviously, we have day camp running Monday through Friday, so there's dogs to work off of if we're ready for that. But I'm not going to just put you right in the middle of 25 other dogs.
Yeah, it's not fair to you or your dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of, the misconception is I need to be around the trigger to fix the trigger. And it's so different because it's more than that. That trigger is happening because of something so much different than what you think it is. And with our dogs, it was that too, So when we were interviewing, we went through so many questions that I know so many people also have board and train, like we talked about, red flags, green flags, how to introduce different instruments to your dogs. And having a trainer that's open-minded is so big. So, a lot of people will start looking into dog training and they'll go through what we went through, best trainer around me.
Why am I not
the
showing
reviews.
up on that search?
I'm sure you are.
And it gets really confusing. And then you learn about the different types and then you wonder if board and train is the right way. So it's just coming up with a list of questions when you're interviewing and trying to figure out what your dog really needs.
Yeah.
You know your dog better than anyone else and you have to live with your dog.
Yep.
What does your dog need? Be open-minded, take the ego out of it, and be open to different trainings. Be open to training that may utilize an e-collar the right way if they really know what they're doing, and then be open to maybe a training that doesn't utilize that. If you're really on board with the e-collar, maybe your dog doesn't need an e-collar.
Yep.
Yeah.
The important thing is, I think, one of the main points about this episode that I wanted to get across is that not all dog training is the same. Every dog trainer has something different to offer you. They might say that they are one thing and maybe not train that that style or maybe what you perceive of that style looking like. But what's really important when you're looking for a trainer is that it feels right. It feels right for you. You're going with your gut. If you have a bad gut feeling, get out. Get out. It's okay to say no, but it's not like a one size fits all kind of thing. You find the trainer that works for you and your dog and your family, but we are not all the same. Not better, worse. We're just all very different. All very different.
And every dog, needs a different training, a different method. Each one of our dogs needed a different method.
Each one of my trainers are different.
Yeah.
We all, even though we all train the same style, I mean, I probably do best with, here we'll put all of our trainers with her dogs. I probably do best with the Bubbles versions. You do great with Rusties. Jill, Max, Connor, Kane. Nope, switch Jill and Connor.
I feel like they could do either or, but
Connor and Max though, because of the hype, and then Jillian loves Kane. But we're all so different that our personalities are going to affect each of those dogs differently, right? Yeah. And yes, that doesn't mean all of my trainers can work with all of those dogs, but we're all gonna communicate with them in a very different way, and we're gonna have different conversations with them. Just like I talk to Easton differently than I talk to Sarah. I talk to Sarah differently than I talk to Jillian because we have different relationships.
Yes. And it's so important to understand the relationships that are out there and to feel comfortable with your trainer. It's all about creating a connection to create a relationship. It's connection, communication, relationship. And that just narrows it all down. If you don't have the connection, you won't be able to even get close to creating that good relationship with your trainer to reflect that on your dog.
Yep.
So, looking for a dog trainer has to feel right for you, and it has to work for your dog. Like you said, you have to get some kind of, solution to the problems that you're looking for.
Not instantaneously.
Yeah.
I mean, don't expect results tomorrow. If somebody's promising you results tomorrow, that's
Red
a red flag.
flag.
Yes. But I mean, you're going to have to do the work for it. But I mean, yeah, you should be seeing results eventually. It's not going to be tomorrow.
Yeah, it takes time, and being able to, understand that time is such a big factor in training, and to understand that you have to put in a lot of that work at home too.
Absolutely.
So if your trainer is not giving you the tools you need to do that every day with your dog, the 90% of the time, then it's, that's also a red flag. If they're just teaching you what, here is your dog, we trained it, it's all good, but they're not giving you the tools to success to go home with and do that day in and day out. So you see a change and you can create that relationship with your dog.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and, I think a lot of dog owners will get confused when looking, but you just, like we talked about today, you have to feel comfortable, go with your gut, ask the questions, be open-minded, because this dog is relying on you for information. So be open-minded to give them the right kind of information. And don't be afraid to, go and look for different kinds of training in your area, or, even, I know that you offer a shadow program for other trainers in your facility.
Yeah. And clients as well. I mean, just dog owners. Absolutely.
And how does the shadow program work?
It depends on what you want to learn, right? So if you want to come to group classes, that's fine. But a lot of people want to see how we run our day camp, and then also they shadow me in sessions. So they'll come with me. They won't be working with the dog, but they'll watch how I explain things to owners, and watch how the trainers run day camp and what all goes into running a structured day camp. But I think the most important thing is vet your trainers, interview them.
Yeah.
And what you said about transparency, that's probably the biggest reason that we have an Instagram page, is because I want people to know we've got nothing to hide. I want you to know exactly how I'm working with your dog or what happens in day camp. If, people won't let you in the back or whatever. I can't let people into a pack of dogs, but we bring people who are interested upstairs so they can watch how we run things. Yeah. But I think making sure that you ask questions, because in that moment you are your dog's advocate, that is the most important thing.
Yeah. And you also offer online,
Absolutely.
over the phone consultations and training sessions.
For that reason.
Yeah. Because a lot of times training is more about training the human and not the dog. So you'd be surprised. It's if you're also hesitant about starting training, ask them if they offer just an over the phone training session or an online training session. So you don't have to put so much time away to drive there and take your dog and go through all those, different situations with your dog. You can be at your home, talk to your trainer, see if you guys have that connection.
And most
go
of the
from
time, the first session is a lot of talking anyway, because we're trying to figure out your dog's day to day. And the first session is figuring out the why, right? That's kind of the way that I look at it. And then coming up with a plan to start a different process there. But I mean, virtual consults are a great way to see if we click. And I'm not going to be offended if you don't call me back. Like I said, it's like finding the right therapist. You have to be able to feel comfortable with that person.
Yeah.
We're not all one size fits all.
Yeah. And that narrows it down too. It's not a one size fits all training. There's so many different kinds. You have to be open-minded for you, for your dog, for you guys to create that relationship. So I think that we covered a lot today with asking questions, ask the questions, open your mind to different kinds of training, and do the research before going out and looking for a trainer. In my case, when the situation happened with my dogs, I freaked out and I just wanted them to get trained right away. And I felt like we couldn't move forward if I didn't find a solution right then and there. But thankfully, we were able to find the right trainer fairly quickly and I didn't have to go through so much, but many people don't have that experience. So don't freak out. Take your time. Look for the information. Take your ego out of it. And be open to letting your dog experience different things, because they have to go through different experiences so they can learn and be able to build a connection with you. So, I think that I hope that a lot of people can get good information from this session, from this episode. And do you guys want to add anything more to,
No, we're adding to the website a place where people can ask questions about what, awesome. Things that they want us to talk about. And I think we'll put up our email if you have any questions you want us to talk about or topics you want us to cover. But other than that, if there's anything we missed, let us know.
Yeah. Make sure to send us your questions. And in the next episode, we are going to discuss the use of different tools in dog training. And we're really going to go in depth about muzzles, e-collars, and so on. So there's a lot to talk about there.
Oh yeah.
We can do a show and tell too.
Ooh, a show and tell.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be cool. I like that.
We'll test it on you again.
No, thank you.
Okay. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at Think Like a Dog Podcast and follow at Mirror Image Canine for training tips. If you have any questions, please reach out to us via email at info@thinklikeadogpodcast.com.